She called me Grandpa. I had never seen her before in my life. She stood there on the edge of my porch, clutching a backpack that looked far too heavy for her tiny shoulders. Sunburned nose, dusty jeans, eyes like mine. The kind of detail you notice later, not in the moment. Grandpa, she said again, a little more certain now. I didn't answer right away. I just blinked at her, as if blinking would somehow bring logic into focus. A child, not more than 12, alone, calling me that word like it meant something, like I was supposed to remember. I think you have the wrong house, I said finally, my voice sounding older than usual. Not tired, just caught off guard. Her chin lifted, just barely. You're Mr. Harold Whitaker, right? I nodded before I could stop myself. That name had weight to it, too much to deny. She stepped forward. Then I don't have the wrong house. I wanted to laugh, or maybe cry, or maybe just close the door. But I didn't. Something in her voice, not defiant, not scared, just steady, pinned me in place. My mama told me you wouldn't know, she said quietly. She told me not to expect a welcome, but I came anyway. The sun behind her made her look smaller somehow, almost transparent, the kind of small that makes you ache. Your mama? I asked, finally inviting the mystery in. She nodded. Her name is Evelyn Whitaker. The name knocked the breath from my lungs like a slow punch. Evelyn. The door creaked wider without me meaning to. She stepped past me like she'd been here before, like the porch remembered her weight. I followed. In the kitchen, she looked around like she was taking inventory, not judging, just observing. Her eyes landed on the old ceramic clock shaped like a sunflower. You still got that thing, she said softly. I hadn't heard that clock mentioned in over 20 years. I cleared my throat. I don't understand. She pulled something out of her backpack, a folded envelope, soft with time. She placed it gently on the kitchen table, like it might break. She wrote you this, before she got sick. I stared at the envelope like it might bite. You want coffee? I asked instead. She nodded. So I made it, the way I always do, slowly with silence between each step. And while it brewed, I opened the envelope. The handwriting was hers, still sharp, still deliberate. My daughter. Harold, it began. I thought I'd have more time, but it looks like that's a luxury I don't get. Her name is June. She's yours too, even if you never got the chance to be her grandfather the way you should have. That's on me. Maybe this letter is selfish, but I told her about you. I told her the truth, or enough of it. If she shows up, let her in. Just that. Let her in. The letter was short, just a page, but my hands trembled like I'd held a whole book. I looked up. June was sitting at the table, sipping from a mug that dwarfed her hands. I don't need anything from you, she said. Just a place to be for a little while. Outside, the wind moved through the oak trees like an old song. I sat down across from her, my voice quiet. You like grilled cheese? She smiled, just a flicker. Depends. Do you burn the edges? I smiled back, maybe for the first time in months. Every time. We didn't talk much more that afternoon, but I noticed she sat with both feet tucked under her chair, like she wasn't sure how long she'd be allowed to stay. I didn't tell her yet about the time I lost Evelyn, or how I'd spent the last 10 years talking to a photograph. I didn't tell her that I'd stopped believing in second chances. I didn't say any of that. But when I brought her the sandwich, edges burnt, cheese perfect, and she looked at me like I was something familiar, I felt something crack, something quiet, something healing. She called me Grandpa. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't correct her. Underneath the back porch light, the garden had grown wild, not in the pretty, poetic way you see in magazines. No, this was the honest kind of wild, vines curling over forgotten bricks, Mint invading the rose bed like it paid rent. Soil cracked in places where rain had stopped visiting. It was a memory trying to forget itself. And yet, that morning I found June there, barefoot, kneeling in the dirt with her jeans rolled up and a determined frown painted across her face. She didn't see me at first. I watched her pull weeds with both hands, her small fingers grimed with earth. She was humming something, quiet and steady, an old gospel tune if my ears remembered right. "You'll need gloves," I said finally. June jumped, then turned with a smirk. "You watching me like I'm going to steal your tomatoes? I haven't had tomatoes in 5 years." She glanced back at the empty trellis. "Well, there's your first problem." I stepped down the porch steps slower than usual, cane tapping gently. "That garden's mostly ghosts. Evelyn used to call it her little patch of stubborn. After she left, I let it turn into a jungle." June wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. "It's not a jungle. It's just waiting. Waiting." That word settled in the air like pollen, thick, invisible, everywhere. "You know anything about gardens?" I asked, more to test her than out of curiosity. She shrugged. "Mama grew basil on the windowsill, and I read a lot. Books tell you more than most people think." I smiled. "Books don't teach the smell of overwatered soil or how squash bugs can ruin your whole week." She grinned back. "Then teach me." So I did. We spent that afternoon in the garden. I showed her the soft parts of soil that still breathed, the corners where worms still did their patient work. She learned fast. Too fast, maybe. Like she'd been born with dirt under her nails. At one point, she held up a sprouting weed and said, "Some things look like flowers till you see what they steal." I didn't answer. That kind of sentence doesn't come from nowhere. After a while, we took a break, sat on the edge of the porch, dirt clinging to our pants, drinking lemonade that tasted mostly like tap water in memory. She looked at me, her voice quieter than usual. "Did you love her? Evelyn?" She nodded. I stared at the horizon a long moment. "Every day, even the days I failed her." June looked down at her scraped knuckles. "She said you were stubborn, said that's where I got it." I laughed once, short and true. She wasn't wrong. There was silence again, but not empty, more like full of things we weren't ready to say. "She used to read to me," June whispered, voice like wind through leaves. "Told me stories when I couldn't sleep, always the ones with gardens in them, even when we didn't have one." I turned toward her. "She wrote me, you know, before she passed." "I know. She let me read it once." Her fingers fiddled with a loose thread on her shirt. "She told me if I ever needed to find myself, I should come find you." I didn't know what to say, so I reached out and gently set my hand on her shoulder. "You're welcome here, June, even if you're still figuring out why." She nodded, eyes shining but proud. She wouldn't cry. Not yet. That night, after she'd gone to bed in the guest room, that still smelled faintly like lavender and old paper, I stood at the back door and looked at the patch of dirt she'd cleared. Small, uneven, messy, but not empty. The garden was still breathing. So was I. The first time I caught her lying, it wasn't even on purpose. I had gone out early. Habit, really. The porch swing still creaked like Evelyn's laugh when the wind caught it just right. The mug in my hand was warm, but the coffee was already going cold. And there she was. June sitting under the old oak, phone pressed too tight to her ear, voice low, too low. "No, I told you he doesn't suspect anything. He just thinks I'm here for the summer." "Yeah, just the summer." My footstep must have snapped a twig or something, because her head whipped around like a deer in tall grass. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open. "Gotta go," she whispered into the phone, then stuffed it into her hoodie pocket like it had betrayed her. I pretended not to notice, pretended my knees were the reason I walked so slowly down the porch steps. pretended I didn't hear every word. "Morning," I said, voice smooth as the silence between lies. "Hey, Grandpa." She smiled too fast, too bright. "Didn't know you were up." "I'm always up." She nodded, stood, brushed imaginary dirt from her jeans. Just, needed air." We didn't speak about it. Not then. But her eyes shifted when I looked at her too long. And later that day, she over-explained why she wanted to walk into town alone. Twice. Something was unraveling. Not all at once. Just thread by thread. The next day I heard her again. Same tree. Different lie. "No, he's not some sweet old man. He's just boring. Quiet. Sad, I guess." A pause. Then laughter. Cold. Short. Not like her. I stayed out of sight that time. I didn't know why. Maybe I didn't want her to know I was listening. Or maybe I didn't want to admit what I was hearing. She was lying. But not just to whoever was on the other end of that call. She was lying to me. And I think she was lying to herself too. Because at dinner, she asked if we could make Evelyn's stew again. Even tried to remember the herbs from the garden. Because at dusk, she left her phone inside and helped me carry the old pots out of the shed. Because when I handed her the broken trowel I hadn't used since Evelyn died, she said, "We could fix this, right?" And she wasn't talking about metal. But still, the calls kept coming. Always outside. Always when she thought I couldn't hear. Sometimes angry. Sometimes desperate. "No, I'm not staying forever. Don't be stupid. I just need a little more time." I started to wonder who she was really talking to. A friend? A boyfriend? Her mother? Someone who didn't want her here. Or worse, someone who wanted her somewhere else. And yet, every time I looked at her hands, covered in soil, bandaged from thorns, gripping a watering can too heavy for her frame, I saw a girl trying to be something new, or trying to hold something together. But you can't build a garden with roots wrapped in secrets. One evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees and turned everything to gold, I found her sitting on the porch swing. Her phone was beside her, face down. She looked up at me like she'd already been caught, like the guilt was heavy in her pocket and leaking into her voice. "I know what you heard," she said before I could even sit. I raised an eyebrow. "Which part?" She didn't flinch, just looked away. "All of it." Silence. Then, "I didn't mean it. Not all of it." I nodded slowly. "Then what did you mean?" She swallowed hard. "I mean, I came here because I had nowhere else to go. And I told them I was fine. Told them you were harmless, safe, easy, because I needed them to believe I could handle it. And can you?" Her voice cracked, almost too soft to hear. "I don't know." I sat beside her. The porch creaked. The silence stretched. "When Evelyn was sick," I said, "she lied to me every day. Said she wasn't hurting. Said she didn't need help. But I knew." June looked at me, really looked. "What did you do?" I stayed. I listened. And when the truth finally came, I loved her anyway. Her lip trembled. "I didn't mean to lie." "I know." She nodded, wiped her eyes. "I'm scared of what happens after this, of going back." "Then don't go back," I said. "Stay long enough to find the truth. And when you find it, don't lie to yourself about it." She took a breath, let it out slow, and for the first time since she arrived, she didn't reach for her phone. Not once. It started with a knock. Not the soft kind. Not the kind neighbors use when they're just bringing by peaches in a basket or asking if you've seen their dog. No, this knock was firm, official, like it had a purpose sharper than politeness. I was still finishing my second cup of coffee when June opened the door. I didn't even see them at first, just heard her voice crack like a window under pressure. "Can I help you?" she asked. And already I didn't like the way she said it. Too polite, too afraid. I made it to the door in 4 steps. Slow, steady ones. My cane thudded against the floor like a warning drum. 2 people stood there, man and woman. Suits, not shiny, but pressed. The kind people wear when they want you to know they mean business, but also want you to feel like maybe they don't. The man spoke first. "Thomas Reed?" "Yes." He held up a badge. One of those little leather flips like you see on television, except this one didn't look like it came from a costume store. "I'm Agent Keller. This is Agent Marlowe. We're with the Department of State Affairs." State Affairs? That could mean anything, which is exactly the point. "What's this about?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. They exchanged a look. That look, the one people give before they say something that sounds rehearsed but hits like a punch. "We'd like to ask your granddaughter a few questions," Marlowe said gently, too gently. June froze beside me. I could feel it. Her breath caught in her chest, the stiffness in her shoulders, her fingers brushing mine like she was checking if I was still real. "She's not in trouble," Keller added, which of course always means the opposite. "We just need clarification," Marlowe said. And then she smiled like it was supposed to soften something, but it didn't. "Clarify what exactly?" I asked, my voice steady, old but not brittle. They looked at each other again. Keller opened a folder. Paper, not a screen, which somehow made it worse. Things on paper mean permanence. "There's been an ongoing investigation involving a network of identity misappropriation. We have reason to believe your granddaughter may have been unknowingly involved." "Unknowingly," I repeated, locking eyes with June. "She wouldn't meet mine." Marlowe stepped forward. "We just want to make sure she's safe, that no one coerced her, that she's here of her own will." Now June looked up, first at Marlowe, then at me. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, but it wasn't defensive. It was small, fragile, like the truth was hiding in the cracks of her voice. I nodded. "Then come inside and tell them what they need to know." But she didn't move. "I don't want to leave," she said. "No one's asking you to," Keller replied, but it didn't feel like a promise. We sat in the front room, June on the edge of the couch, me beside her. Agents across from us, like a chess match no one wanted to play. They asked her questions. Names, places, timelines. Most she answered. Some she hesitated. 1 or 2 she deflected. And then, a photo. Keller slid it across the coffee table like a card in a bad hand. June didn't pick it up, just stared at it. It was her, sort of. The hair was different. The clothes were sharper. She looked older, more dangerous. "Is this you?" Keller asked. "No," June said, but it was a whisper. I spoke before they could. "Is it someone pretending to be you?" June finally nodded. "Yes, kind of. It's complicated." And then the words came, slowly, like peeling wallpaper from an old wall. She'd been recruited, not officially, just online, through a friend, a job, a task, something that paid too well for what it asked. "Deliver this. Say your name is this. Smile. Walk away." She didn't know where the money came from, or where it went after, but it helped her mother pay the rent for 3 months. It helped her eat. It helped her escape. And then it caught up to her. "I didn't know it was bad," she said, eyes wide, red. "At first," Marlowe softened then. "Maybe. Just a little. Why come here?" June didn't look at me. Not directly. Just the corner of her eye, like I was sunlight and she was afraid of going blind. Because he's the only person who didn't ask for anything. Silence wrapped the room like fog. No one moved. Finally, Keller closed the folder. "We're not here to arrest her," he said, "but we'll need follow-up. Interviews. She may need to testify." She's not leaving alone, I said, sharper than I meant. You can come too, Marlowe said. We just want to protect her from whoever pulled her into this. When they left, June sat still for a long time. Her hands were shaking. I didn't know it would find me here, she whispered. I put my hand over hers. Secrets have legs, June, but you've got yours too, and you're not alone. She turned toward me then, tears sliding silently down her cheek. I thought if I ran far enough, it would forget me. I squeezed her fingers. You don't have to run anymore. She nodded slowly, and somewhere in the kitchen, the old clock ticked like a heartbeat, steady, relentless, and still moving forward. It was the way she stirred her tea, slow, deliberate, counterclockwise, like she was unwinding something only she could see. I watched her from the doorway. June, still in that faded hoodie, the one too big for her frame, sleeves pulled over her palms like armor. Her spoon clicked gently against the porcelain, and she didn't look up once. Is it too hot? I asked. She shook her head, but she didn't sip it. I stepped inside, cane tapping against the old tile. You slept in, I added, not accusing, just noticing. Had a dream, she said finally. I waited, but she didn't explain. Instead, she said, do you ever forget something on purpose? That caught me. I paused beside the counter, hands resting on the edge. Sometimes the mind protects itself. She nodded, eyes still on the tea. Then why does it still hurt? I didn't answer. Some questions don't want answers, just company. She finally took a sip, winced. Too cold now. I sat across from her, the way I always did when she had something not to say. What happened? I asked gently. She blinked. It was before I came here, back when I thought I could fix everything by pretending it never happened. The clock ticked. Once, twice, and then I met someone, she said. Not like romantic, just someone. I stayed quiet. He said he could help, said he knew how to make problems disappear. Debts, records, names. He was charming, too charming. I knew it even then. But I was tired of being scared. Her fingers tightened around the cup. He asked me to do something, one small favor, said it would make things clean, said it was just a formality. I leaned forward. What kind of favor? She looked at me then, eyes raw. I don't know. That stopped me. I showed up, just like he asked. This tall building, downtown, fancy place. I signed in under a fake name. He gave it to me. Wore a coat he told me to wear. Sat in a lobby for 20 minutes. Didn't talk to anyone. Then I left. That's it? I asked. She nodded. That's it. But 2 weeks later, I saw that same building on the news. A fraud investigation. A missing person. I don't know if it's connected, but it feels like it is. And I can't forget it. I've tried. Silence fell again. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. But I was part of it, she whispered. Even if I didn't know. That's not guilt, I told her. That's grief. You grieve who you were before, and who you thought you were. Her voice was barely audible. They'll find out. I nodded. Maybe. And if they do, we face it. Together. June stared at her tea again. If I tell them everything, they'll stop trusting me. No, I said, leaning in. If you tell them everything, they'll start. She looked up, slow, like dawn trying to break through a cloudy sky. I don't want to be scared anymore, she said. Then don't be, I replied. Tell your story, or the part you're ready for. The rest can come later. Her eyes welled again. But what if I don't know where the story starts? You just told me, I said, with a spoon in your hand and a dream you didn't explain. She laughed, a small, broken sound. You always make it sound like I'm braver than I feel. I smiled. That's because you are. We sat there for a while longer, the tea growing cold, the silence growing warm, and somewhere outside the wind picked up, just enough to rattle the window, like the past knocking softly, waiting to be let in. But not this morning. This morning, she just sipped her tea and let herself breathe. The room had no key, only memory. It was on the second floor, tucked at the end of the hall. The door always closed, the handle never warm. June had passed it a dozen times since she arrived, never once asking, until today. I heard her voice behind me, not loud but sharp. "What's in there?" I paused mid-step. My hand halfway to the railing stopped. The air seemed to contract. "Storage," I said too quickly. She didn't respond, just walked past me and stood in front of the door. Her hand hovered near the knob, but she didn't touch it. "It doesn't feel like storage," she whispered. I stayed still. "I've heard something," she added. "At night, sometimes, like humming." The old house had many ghosts, some real, some just the way floorboards remember the weight of old footsteps. But this door, this room, it held something heavier. I stepped closer. "It's not time yet," I said gently. She turned to me, not angry, not defiant, just tired of being told later. "Why not?" "Because I wasn't ready to open it either." Still, I reached into my pocket, slowly, and handed her the brass key. She looked down at it like it might burn. "I thought you said it didn't have a key," she said. "I lied," I admitted, because I wasn't sure which truth to tell. June didn't move for a long moment. Then she placed the key into the lock, slowly, carefully, like every turn might summon something. It clicked. The door creaked open, just a breath, and the air that came out smelled of lavender and dust. Inside, the room was dim, faded yellow wallpaper curling at the corners, a twin bed with a handmade quilt, and on the desk beneath the window, a photograph. June stepped in first, her shoes whispering across the floorboards. She picked up the photo, studied it. "Who is she?" "My daughter," I said. June turned, eyes wide, not in shock, but in recognition. She'd never seen a picture, but she'd seen something in my silence. "What happened?" I exhaled. "She got sick, slowly at first, then all at once. We tried everything, every clinic, every doctor, and for a while she smiled through it, made the pain feel like background noise." June's fingers tightened around the frame. "She died in this room," I said softly, "and I locked the door because I wasn't strong enough to let her go or let her stay." Silence filled the space like fog. June set the photo down, sat on the bed, ran her fingers across the quilt. I thought you didn't know what grief felt like," she said. "I wish I didn't," I replied. She looked around the room, not like a visitor, but like someone listening for echoes. "She'd like you," I said. June smiled faintly. "She liked wildflowers. More than roses, said wildflowers were braver. They grew wherever they landed." June's eyes shimmered. "She sounds like someone I would have followed." "She sounds like someone I still do," I murmured. We sat in the stillness, past and present folding in on themselves like layers of fabric. Then June stood. "Can we leave the door open now?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't take the key with her. And that night, for the first time in 10 years, the light from the hallway spilled gently into that room, and the humming, it finally stopped. It started with a torn envelope. Nothing dramatic, just an ordinary piece of paper wedged between bills and grocery ads. June found it. She brought it to me without a word, but I could feel her breath hitch as she held it out. Why was this hidden behind the radiator? I turned it over slowly. My name scribbled in sharp blue ink. Not mine. The postmark was 10 years old, from Albany. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but I recognized the feeling in my chest, like something knocking from the inside. I opened it, just a single sheet of paper, yellowing at the edges, typed, not handwritten. Parental consent for temporary custody transfer, case ID 8712H. I read it once, then twice. I didn't blink. June watched me. Is that about me? I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I went to the desk, opened the bottom drawer, the one I never touched, and inside more envelopes, dozens of them, some unopened, some half-read and reburied, some from state agencies, others from names I once promised never to say aloud. I laid them out like puzzle pieces, and June, wide-eyed, began connecting them faster than I could stop her. Temporary custody, court extensions, withheld correspondence. She looked up at me, her voice suddenly a whisper. You weren't supposed to keep me, were you? There it was, the truth, not breaking through the ceiling like thunder, just laying itself down gently like dust. No, I said. I wasn't. She stepped back, not in fear, in realization. You fought for me? I nodded. They said I was too old, too unstable, that someone else could give you more. But I had this picture. I fumbled in the drawer again, pulled out the photograph. Her, 4 years old, covered in finger paint, smiling like she'd swallowed the sun. That day, I told myself if I could hold on to that smile, just that, I could hold on to you. June blinked hard. They sent letters to scare me off, and I continued. Warnings, forms, deadlines. But I never signed anything that let you go. Not really, she whispered, but the school said they were told what they needed to hear. It was cleaner that way. Her voice cracked. So why didn't you ever tell me? Because every day you stayed, I was terrified it might be the last. And saying it out loud made it feel more real. She stared at the pile of papers, an avalanche of unspoken war. They tried to take me away, she said quietly. They did, I replied. And every month I wrote back. I begged, I sent proof. I mailed stories of your drawings, your garden, your terrible scrambled eggs. Anything to remind them you weren't a file. You were home. June knelt by the letters, touching them like artifacts. You were all I had, I said softly, and I wasn't going to let a system file you away like you were paperwork. She reached for the oldest envelope, its corner torn and faded. Inside was a note I'd written, never mailed. If she ever asks who chose her, tell her I did. June folded the letter in half, then pressed it to her chest. You still have the picture? She asked. Always. And just like that, a paper trail no longer felt like a threat. It felt like proof that love had to fight harder than it ever should have, but didn't stop. Spresit ChatGPT. It wasn't loud. The way she said it, it didn't echo. It didn't sting. It just settled, like dusk rolling in through an open window. We were in the shed, of all places. She sat on the old wooden crate with her knees pulled to her chest. Her voice was barely more than breath. I knew you weren't my real grandfather. I didn't flinch. I didn't even try to deny it. She looked at her hands, then up at me. But I didn't say anything because I didn't want it to stop feeling real. Outside, a breeze nudged the ivy on the fence. Inside, my heart broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. How long have you known? I asked, quietly, cautiously. June shrugged, but it wasn't careless. A while. Things didn't add up. No baby pictures, different last names on the mailbox, the way you dodge questions. I sat down across from her. The dust from the floor stirred between us. You let me pretend, she said, not accusing, just observing. And I let you. My throat was dry. It was never pretending, not to me. I know, she whispered. That's why I didn't say anything. I wanted to explain. I wanted to lay it all out. The court papers, the begging letters, the legal footnotes that reduced a human life to checkboxes and deadlines. But she didn't need that. She needed something simpler. I chose you, I said. She closed her eyes just for a moment, then nodded. Once, slow, like she was finally letting herself believe it. I used to have dreams, she said, almost smiling, that I was taken from someone else, but not in a scary way. More like there was someone out there who had to give me up but didn't want to. Her eyes opened. Do you know who she was? I hesitated. I know pieces. I know what she struggled with. I know she loved you, but she wasn't ready, and the state, I stopped myself. They tried to fit you into a system that didn't see you. And you just, kept me? I nodded. I couldn't let them lose you. June reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out. A folded piece of paper, wrinkled and softened at the creases. I found this in your drawer last year, she said. It's your handwriting. She handed it to me. It was a note, one I barely remembered writing. Just a sentence scribbled in a shaky hand. If she ever doubts where she belongs, remind her. Home is where someone waits for her, no matter what. I looked at her, really looked, at the way her jaw clenched slightly when she fought emotion, at the way her eyes scanned mine, always looking for the truth behind the silence. I was scared, I said, scared that if you knew everything, it would undo the years we had. She shook her head. It makes them stronger. And just like that, the truth stopped being heavy. It became hers, a truth she could hold, shape, speak. I don't care what the records say, June whispered. You're mine. And in the deepest part of me, the part that never dared to hope, I realized something I hadn't been brave enough to say. You're mine too. The violin wasn't in its case. It lay there on the old velvet armchair, as if someone had just played it and stepped out for air. The strings were slightly dusty, not broken, not clean, and the bow rested gently beside it like an old friend keeping watch. June was the one who found it. Of course she was. I heard her voice from the hallway. Soft, awestruck. There's music in this. I stepped into the room slowly. Her fingers hovered over the body of the instrument, not touching, just sensing. It was hers, I said. June looked up. My mother's. I nodded. She used to play it late at night, when the house was quiet, when she thought no one could hear. June's eyes didn't leave the violin. Was she good? I smiled. Not just with my mouth, but the kind that swells up from somewhere behind the ribs. She was something else, not trained, not polished, but when she played, the whole house leaned in to listen. There was a silence between us then, not heavy, but respectful. June finally let her fingers touch the strings. They hummed under her skin, like a whisper from the past. And then she asked, why did she stop? I looked away, to the window, to the place where light used to fall differently in those days. She didn't stop. The world stopped her. Too many nights working 2 jobs. Too many rooms that didn't want her music. She tucked it away before you were born. June reached for the bow. She didn't lift it, just held it like something sacred. Then she saw the photograph. It had slipped behind the cushion, small, square, faded at the edges. She picked it up and turned it gently. A woman, young, tired-eyed but smiling, holding the violin beneath her chin, and in her lap, a baby. She kept this? June asked, barely breathing. I moved beside her. She did, even when she lost everything else. Why didn't I ever see this before? Because I didn't know how to give it to you, I admitted. I didn't know if you were ready to see her not as a myth, but as a person. Real, complicated, human. June sat down slowly, the violin in her lap now, like muscle memory she never had but somehow understood. She looks like me, she said. Or maybe I look like her. She would have wanted you to have this. June traced the edge of the photo. I used to make up stories about her, she whispered. What she liked, what she feared. I gave her a favorite flower once, orange tulips. I don't even know why. She loved honeysuckle, I said. Used to steal it from the neighbor's fence when she was little. June smiled. Of course she did. Then, without warning, she lifted the violin to her shoulder. Awkward, unsure. But her eyes, they focused like someone stepping into their own reflection for the first time. And she drew the bow, a soft, trembling note. Not perfect, but honest. Raw, alive. The room held its breath. She's still here, isn't she? June asked. I didn't need to answer, because in that moment, between the photograph, the strings, the girl and the silence, she already knew. She stood at the mirror for a long time, longer than any teenager should, longer than any child might, not adjusting makeup or smoothing hair, but searching. June held the photograph like it had weight, not paper, but memory. Did she ever laugh? She asked without turning around. I stepped closer, not to invade her space, but to anchor it. All the time, I said. She had a laugh that broke rules. Loud, unapologetic, like thunder that chose joy. June nodded, her eyes still locked on her reflection. I can't remember her voice. Not really. Just the idea of it, that it was warm, but not the sound. I wanted to hand it to her. A recording, a voicemail, anything. But the world hadn't kept those things. What it had kept was story. She used to sing when she cleaned, I said quietly. Not real songs, just strings of words and sounds she made up on the spot. And she'd spin, like the mop was a dance partner. June let out a small breath. That sounds fake. It wasn't. She turned. Did she cry a lot? I looked at her. Really looked. Only when she thought no one was watching, or when she was holding you. Me? She said it was because you made her feel everything at once. Love, fear, hope, exhaustion. June sat down on the edge of the bed. The photo rested in her lap, turned so her mother's face looked up at her. She's not the woman people told me she was, she said. No, I agreed. She was more. Then why did everyone always talk about what she didn't do, what she failed at? I sat beside her, not to comfort, but to be present. Because people confuse struggle with failure. They forget how hard she fought just to make breakfast, or smile, or give you her last clean shirt. June was quiet. Then, tell me something she loved that had nothing to do with me. I smiled. Sunset thunderstorms. Spicy food that made her cry. Dancing barefoot on cold tile. She loved terrible crime novels with ripped covers and folding laundry in exact piles. June blinked. She was weird. She was real. And then, almost in a whisper, June asked, was she angry? I paused. Sometimes, I said, but not at you. She was angry at the world, at time, at how fast it moved and how slow it forgave. June traced the edge of the photograph again. I always thought, if I could just be better, smarter, quieter, maybe she would have stayed. No, I said gently but firmly. She left because the world didn't give her a way to stay. But she didn't leave you. She died, June said, and no one talks about how. Just that she did. I took a long breath. She had a heart condition, undiagnosed. She thought it was stress, fatigue. She ignored it because she had to work and care and push. And one day it pushed back too hard. June didn't cry. Not then. She just held the photograph closer. She was strong, she said. Yes. And scared. Yes. She's not a ghost anymore, is she? I shook my head. Not to you. June looked out the window, and something about the light caught her face just right. For a second, I saw both of them, mother and daughter, overlapping in time. I think, June whispered, I can love her now. Not the idea of her, but the woman she was. And just like that, something healed, not fully, not forever, but enough. Enough to begin again. The front door creaked the way old doors do, not just from age, but from memory, like it recognized the hand that touched it. June stood in the entryway, arms crossed tight, her eyes scanning everything at once and nothing in particular. The air smelled like dust and lavender, and something harder to name, something like waiting. This isn't a house, she said softly. It's a witness. I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. She walked slowly down the hall, fingers grazing the wallpaper, the faint raised pattern, the scars left behind by frames that once held photos. The silence was thick, not empty, but listening. This was mine, right? She asked. Not just hers. It was always yours. But they said she lost it, that it didn't belong to us anymore. I nodded slowly. Because people confuse ownership with paperwork. But home is who breathes in it, who bleeds into the walls, who dreams under the ceiling and breaks under the weight of the roof, and still wakes up anyway. June opened a closet door, empty, except for a single box on the floor, no tape, no label. She knelt beside it and peeled it open. Inside were receipts, notes, a broken necklace, a child's drawing, stick figures under crooked rainbows, a set of plastic keys on a ring. She picked them up, held them to her chest like they unlocked something real. She hid this, June whispered. No, I said. She protected it. She stared at the box, then back at the empty house. I remember the kitchen light flickering and the stove clicking, and how the water pressure always made a sound like a tired cough. That's memory talking, I said, not real estate. She laughed, not fully, but enough to start a sound. Then, why does it hurt more to see it empty than it ever did to lose it? Because now, it feels like it's asking you a question. She turned to me. What question? What are you going to do with the space she left behind? We didn't speak for a moment. Then she stood, the plastic keys still in her hand. I want to repaint it, she said. Not sell it, not erase it. Repaint. Patch what can be patched. Fill the cracks. Open the windows. Let it remember who we are. I looked at her. Really looked. You don't need permission for that. She nodded. They thought it was property, she said. They treated it like an asset to divide. But it's not. It's inheritance, I said, of a different kind. June stepped back into the living room and stood in the light that filtered through cracked blinds and dust motes. She used to hum here, she said. When she folded laundry, I remember the rhythm. She hummed because it kept her from crying. June didn't answer. She just closed her eyes and listened. And I swear, in that quiet room, I heard it too. A soft note, a slow rise. Can I live here again? She asked. You never stopped, I said. And with that, June bent down and placed the plastic keys on the dusty windowsill, like an offering, like a promise. Not everything broken needs replacing. Some things just need to be seen again. Under the low amber light of a cafe that had no business being open past 10, the boy sat with a notebook and eyes too wide for someone so quiet. He didn't order anything, just sipped the same lukewarm cocoa while his pencil tapped the paper like it was thinking for him. I approached carefully, not out of fear, but reverence. Some questions carry the weight of names not yet spoken aloud. He didn't look up when I sat down. Your name's Caleb, right? A nod, small, unsure, then a whisper. She told you about me. She did, I said. Not everything, but enough. He finally looked at me in his eyes. They weren't angry, not exactly, just tired of being polite. Is she dead? Straight, no hesitation, no padding. Yes, I said, because lies have long legs but tired feet, but not the way you think. What does that mean? I took a breath. Because how do you explain that someone can stop breathing years before their heart quits? She lived in pieces, Caleb, and most of those pieces weren't hers. He frowned. She didn't want me, he said. She didn't know how to want anyone, not until she wanted you to forget her pain. He flipped the page in his notebook, blank again. She gave me this when I turned 9, he said. Said I'd have answers if I waited long enough. And have you? He shrugged. I'm 12 now. That feels like long enough. Silence. Then, why didn't she keep me? That question, heavier than a name, sharper than grief. She was afraid, I said. Not of you, of what she might become with you. She became something worse without me. I nodded. You're right. He put the pencil down. Everyone told me to forget, but I couldn't. Every time I started to forget, I'd remember how she brushed my hair like she was afraid it would fall out, or how she cried when I slept, like I wouldn't hear. You did hear, I said. He looked at me with wet eyes but didn't cry. I don't want to forgive her, he whispered. Is that okay? It is. And I still love her, even though I don't want to. That's okay too. He leaned back, stared at the ceiling like maybe it could offer something better than I could. Do you think she meant it? Giving me away? No, I said, but I think she believed she had to, and believing the wrong thing can feel as powerful as truth when you're drowning. Caleb was quiet again. Then, will you tell me about her? The version she didn't show me? I will, but only if you're ready. I was ready the day she left. So I told him, in pieces, in stories, in pauses long enough for truth to echo. And when we were done, when his cocoa had gone cold and the cafe lights began flickering like they too were tired, he stood. He didn't say thank you. He just opened his notebook and finally began to write, not answers, not conclusions, but beginnings. And sometimes that's all a boy needs. The rain had stopped, but the earth still held the memory of it. Damp leaves clung to the soles of my shoes as I walked the edge of the empty lot. The place she once said would grow sunflowers taller than any of our regrets. It was quiet now. No voices, no laughter. Just possibility whispering through cracked sidewalks and bent fence posts. Caleb walked beside me, slower than before, but with purpose. His shoulders didn't slouch anymore. They listened, like he was finally hearing something between every breath. She wanted this to be something, he said softly, not just a memory, but a place. She left blueprints, I replied, and sketches, some real, some just dreams on napkins, but enough to know where to begin. He knelt in the dirt, not to mourn, but to touch, to feel what was still alive beneath the ruin. His fingers brushed the roots of a stubborn weed, and he smiled. I like that it didn't die, he said, even when no one was watching. Weeds are like people, I said. They grow wherever they can, even in the cracks. That made him laugh, not loudly, but real. The kind of laugh that doesn't ask permission. From the porch, the others watched, a slow gathering of hands and hearts who had known her in pieces. Neighbors, friends, Strangers who only remembered the sound of her violin, but not her face. And still, they came. Jessie carried the old box of letters she'd written and never sent. Miriam held the framed photograph, the one with her standing in the garden, hair undone, eyes soft. Even the mayor showed up, awkward in his press suit, but he brought shovels. "We can't promise funding," he said. "We didn't ask for that," I replied. "We just asked for soil, and we had it, all of it. Rich, damp, waiting." "She used to tell me," Caleb said, standing again, "that nothing was truly gone, not if someone remembered how it felt." She was right. He looked at me, steady now, taller than yesterday somehow. "Then let's build something that remembers how she felt." And we did. We planted wildflowers first, not in rows but scattered, like her stories, messy and beautiful. We pulled nails from broken boards and turned them into wind chimes. We painted benches with the names of every child she'd taught to read, or hold a brush, or trust again. A sign went up by the gate, nothing fancy, just a piece of reclaimed wood with burned-in letters. The garden she imagined people asked if it was a memorial. "No," Caleb would say. "It's a beginning." We set up a small shed as a reading room, another as a place to paint. Each wall held her handwriting, lines from journals, songs, apologies too raw to mail. Children played there now. Mothers sat in shade that hadn't existed 6 weeks before. Elders planted herbs they said she once used in tea. The community grew roots where grief once bloomed. And one morning, as we repainted the door, Caleb turned to me and asked, "Do you think she sees this?" I paused. "I think she feels it." He nodded. Then, without warning, he reached into his backpack and pulled out the ribbon. Her ribbon, the one she'd tied in his hair the night before she left him. It was frayed now, faded at the edges, but strong. He climbed the ladder and tied it to the gate, just above the name. Let it dance in the wind. Let it say what words no longer needed to. We didn't hold a grand opening. No cameras, no speeches. Just people, showing up, carrying tools, stories, seeds. And in time, what we built began to carry us too. The boy who had questions became the boy who gave answers. The garden that held sorrow now held birthdays and song circles and letters written to the sky. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the wind was right and the dusk turned amber, I swore I could hear her laugh, soft, distant, but home, because we hadn't just remembered her, we'd built from her. The ribbon was still there, fluttering above the garden gate like a memory that refused to settle. Frayed now at both ends, sun-bleached but defiant, it danced with every gust like it had its own unfinished story to tell. Caleb touched it each morning when he passed, not like a ritual, but like a promise. That morning was different. The sky was gray, not with rain, but with something unspoken, the kind of air that waits. Caleb lingered longer at the gate, fingers wrapped around the wood just beneath the ribbon. He didn't say anything at first, just stood still, his thoughts braided into silence. Then he turned. "She left a key," he said. I blinked. "What kind of key?" He opened his hand. In his palm was a small brass key, worn at the teeth, tied to a note with red thread. His voice shook a little as he read it aloud. "For when you're ready, not just to open, but to understand. Love always, her." The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, sharp at the ends. Her way. "Where did you find this?" I asked. "In the violin case," he said. "Under the lining. I wasn't even looking, just cleaning it, like she told me to." We stared at it like it might speak. "What does it open?" I whispered. He shook his head. "I don't know, but I think I need to find out." The rest of the day moved around us, but we didn't move with it. The key, the ribbon, they held us there, suspended between then and now. That evening, Caleb returned. His shoes were muddy. His shirt clung to his back. But his eyes, they burned with knowing. I found it, he said. He didn't have to say where. Her old house. The one she never went back to. The one she never sold. The one she called the Pause. It opened a drawer, Caleb said, pulling out an envelope. Just one drawer, locked beneath everything. It held this. He handed me the letter. No name on the front. Just one word. Truth. Inside was her handwriting again. Pages of it. A confession. Not of guilt, but of the weight she'd carried. She wrote of a sister no one knew she had. One lost to the system, never adopted, left behind in foster homes while she was taken in. She wrote of trying to find her, of failing, of the guilt that followed her through every garden, every student, every night she played the violin. I poured into others what I couldn't give to her, she wrote, but it was never enough. You can build light, but until you unlock the door, you locked yourself. You're still lost. At the bottom of the letter, a photocopy, a photo, two girls and one with the ribbon, one with the key. She wanted me to know, Caleb whispered, not just that she tried, but that the trying mattered. He sat beside me, the letter between us like a bridge. Do you think I'm supposed to do something with this? He asked. Yes, I said without hesitation. You're supposed to carry it, not as a burden, but as a torch. Later that night, Caleb stood beneath the ribbon again. He tied the brass key next to it. Not hidden, displayed, side by side. Why leave it here, I asked. He didn't look away from the gate. Because someone else might need it. And somehow, I knew he was right. We didn't write a plaque. We didn't explain the symbol. We just let it be. A ribbon, a key, a question. And over time, people came to touch them. They didn't always ask, but sometimes they lingered a little longer. Sometime they left something of their own, a button, a feather, a drawing, a note. And soon the gate held more than memories. It held stories, unfinished, untold, but never again, unlocked. The morning it hit print, the city felt louder somehow, even though the streets were quiet, even though the sky was soft and blue. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe it was the weight of being seen, finally, in ink that couldn't be taken back. Caleb held the paper in both hands like it might blow away. Front page, lower corner. Not screaming, not shouting. But there. A photograph of him standing beside the garden gate, the ribbon and the brass key visible just behind his shoulder. His expression caught mid-thought, almost wary, but with a glint of something else, something steadier. The headline was simple. A garden, a key, a voice. The boy who reopened a story. He didn't speak for a while, just stared at it. Let it settle into his chest like a second heartbeat. Do you regret it? I asked quietly, watching him from across the porch. He shook his head. No, but I didn't think it would feel like this. Like what? Like I gave the world a piece of her, and now everyone thinks they understand. He folded the paper, slow and careful, then pressed his fingers to the edge. But they don't. Not really. They only know the outline. We sat in silence for a while. A bird sang something brief and broken from the tree line. Somewhere a car backfired, distant like a memory. Then he said, they called again. Who? The journalist, Claudia. She wants to do a follow-up, a longer piece. She says people want to know more about the house, the key, the letter. And? I said yes. I blinked. You did? He nodded almost to himself. But only if Jada speaks too. Jada, who had stayed mostly quiet since the first piece, who had painted the mural, who had read the letter 3 times and cried each one, who had told Caleb some things don't need to be told unless you want them to be. He called her that afternoon. The call was brief, but when he hung up, he smiled. She said, okay. Claudia arrived the next day with a small crew. Not lights and makeup and noise, just 2 cameras, soft shoes, and questions that came gently like rain before the storm. They filmed in the garden, in the room with the violin, at the gate. They asked about the letter, the sister, the foundation. But the moment that mattered most came when Claudia lowered her notepad and simply asked, "Why now?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked at the ribbon, then at the key, then at the ground. "Because silence kept her safe," he said slowly, "but it also kept others in the dark. And I think she left that key so we wouldn't stay there." Then he turned to Jada. "She opened something in me, so now I have to open something for others." Jada spoke next, quieter but no less certain. "I used to think stories ended when people left, or when houses emptied, but I think some stories get passed like torches, and if we don't carry them, we just let them go out." The air felt heavier after that. Not bad, just full. Later, Claudia asked to photograph the drawer, the one where the letter had been. Caleb agreed, but only after placing a small white flower inside it. He didn't explain why. He didn't have to. The article published 3 days later. Longer, deeper, titled simply, "The Locked Drawer." Readers wrote letters, emails. One man sent a sketch of the ribbon. A girl from Detroit mailed in a tiny brass key and said, "I don't know what mine opens yet, but thank you for showing me it matters." And then came the school principal, from the very district where her sister had disappeared all those years ago. She asked if Caleb and Jada would speak to a class. Just one. Just to tell them that not everything lost stays gone. Caleb agreed. That morning, before walking into the school, he touched the ribbon still tied around his wrist. Jada stood beside him. The world felt big again, but not in a scary way. "They'll ask hard questions," she warned. He nodded. "We'll give honest answers." Inside, a small boy in the front row raised his hand before they even sat down. "Did she love you?" Caleb didn't smile. He just said, "Yes, enough to leave me the truth." And for a moment, the room held its breath. And then the questions came, like keys, unlocking more than anyone expected. That porch had been nothing but sagging wood and chipped paint when Caleb first noticed it, barely holding together, like the stories the house had once buried. But something about it kept drawing his eyes. Maybe because it was the last place she had stood before vanishing. Maybe because it was where the first truth had landed. Either way, it was time. "We fix it," he said one morning, brushing dust from the old railing. "Not for show, for memory." Jada looked at him, brow lifted. "A porch? You want to rebuild a porch?" "No," Caleb said softly. "I want to build the place where people stop before they speak." And just like that, the porch project was born. It started with wood, heavy slats, sanded smooth. Each one carried by hand. No trucks, no fanfare. Then came the brushes, the paint, the stubborn nails that bent like tired promises. They worked mostly in silence, not out of discomfort, but reverence. Jada handled the corners. Caleb did the beams. Naomi sent over permits and contractors. "Just in case," she said, but neither of them used them. This one had to be by hand. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and gold across the planks, Caleb found something under the old floorboards. A marble, blue with a swirl of white through the middle, like a sky trapped in glass. "Her sister collected these," he whispered. Jada looked up. "You sure?" "I used to find them all over the yard, like little secrets she dropped on purpose." He placed the marble on the windowsill. Didn't clean it, didn't pocket it, just left it where light could catch it. By the end of the week, the porch stood again, not like new, but like itself, finally remembered. The paint was the same soft gray from a photo they'd found in the attic. A photo taken decades ago of two girls sitting side by side with matching ribbons in their hair. She would have liked this, Caleb said, staring out across the street, the boards warm beneath his feet. People will sit here. They'll think here. Jada sat beside him. Or they'll cry, or write, or just breathe. Exactly, he whispered. Naomi came that weekend. She didn't say much, just walked across the porch in quiet steps, then turned to face them with that lawyer's nod that meant more than words. You built something durable, she said. We built a place to pause, Caleb replied, and it worked. Soon neighbors stopped by, first with questions, then with stories. A woman came to leave a photo of her brother missing since 1996. A teenager brought a poem, folded and shy, and whispered, "This porch feels safe." Then the local high school called. They wanted to send students, just to visit, to talk, to sit. And so they came, some in silence, others in pieces. And every time Caleb would meet them with the same soft voice. Take your time. The porch doesn't rush. By midsummer, the railing held names, etched in chalk, in ink, in memory. Someone left a ribbon tied to the far corner, fluttering in the wind. Jada added a bench. Naomi hung a tiny plaque, one line carved deep. Truth waits, right here. One evening, as fireflies blinked lazy through the dusk, Caleb leaned back and closed his eyes. He felt the wood beneath him, steady and strong. This is her voice now, he said. This place, this feeling. Jada rested her head on his shoulder. Then let's make sure it never goes quiet. And they did. The first letter came on a Tuesday, folded twice, no return address, just a wax seal pressed into plain cream paper. Jada found it on the porch rail, right beneath the marble they'd left weeks ago. She held it up like it might vanish if she blinked too hard. It's not weather-worn, she murmured. Someone left it this morning. Caleb took it slowly, his fingers tracing the seal before he broke it. Inside was a single sentence, written in black ink. The kind of black that bled slightly into the page. I wasn't ready to speak, but now I am. No name, no date, just that. They didn't speak for a moment. The cicadas buzzed in the trees like some distant engine of time still turning and turning. That evening, the light on the porch flickered, just once. Caleb checked the bulb, tightened the base, and nodded to himself. She's coming, he said. Who? Jada asked. Someone, Caleb whispered. Maybe more than one. By Friday, the porch had become more than wood and nails. It had become a gathering, not loud, not planned, just steady. People started arriving after sunset, not always with words, but always with something. Letters, photos, a broken bracelet, a page torn from a diary, corners soft with years. No one spoke at first. They just sat and breathed. The porch held them. Then the second light flickered on, the one over the front steps. That one's been broken for months, Caleb said. Jada smiled. Maybe it remembered. By the end of the week, 6 people had left notes under the marble, each signed only with initials, each one a truth too long buried. He never came home that night. She made me swear not to tell. I was there. I saw it. Each one folded like prayer, and sacred. Caleb stopped sanding the railing after dark, said it felt wrong to interrupt the silence. Instead, he lit a lantern, placed it in the corner where the wind couldn't reach. Every night they added oil. Every morning it still burned. Naomi showed up again, this time with a young man in a gray jacket, barely 20, eyes darting like a deer's. "This is Carter," she said gently. He read the article. Said he wanted to stand on the porch. Carter stepped up slowly, his sneakers squeaking against the wood. He looked around like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. Then he whispered, "She used to bring me here. When I was little. She said it was where Liz went to die." Caleb just nodded. "Then you're home." Carter didn't speak again, just sat down staring at the ribbon still tied to the corner post. And the porch glowed around him, golden and still. It became a ritual. Sunset, then stories. Twilight, then silence. Night, then truth. They called it the light on the porch, without even meaning to. A name whispered more than spoken. A signal, maybe. A promise. And people came. A woman in scrubs who said she never told anyone what her patient had whispered before dying. A school teacher with a birth certificate that didn't match her name. An old man who brought a faded photo and wept like the war had just ended. They all came and left something behind. Not always objects, sometimes just wait. And the porch held it, held them. One night it rained, steady and soft, but the lantern stayed lit. Jada watched the water beat across the railings, heard the drops tap like fingers on the roof. She said softly, "We didn't just rebuild a porch, Caleb. We built a confessional without walls." He turned toward her, the candlelight catching in his eyes. "No judgment," he said. "No priest, just light and the willingness to stay." That week, a journalist arrived. Not Naomi's contact, but someone else. From a national paper. She didn't ask many questions, just listened. Then she said quietly, "There's something about this place, like it remembers what we forget." Jada nodded. "It doesn't just remember, it invites." The article was published 3 days later. "The Porch That Listens." Bold letters beneath a photo of dusk and ribbon and 2 chairs side by side. By the next weekend, there were candles placed in a row. By strangers, one lit for each story told. Caleb didn't ask who left them. He didn't need to. Light was its own confession now, and the porch just kept listening.